Hello everyone. So the last topic and a very important topic for a NEET exam, a sure short question is ECG. For our level for NEET, this they have confined the information. They have not tried to explain the importance of ECG. But once you get into medical college, and you get into a medicine OP, everywhere you will hear this term ECG, 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 ECG. You'll be fed up with this term. Such value it takes when it comes to patient. A basic diagnostic tool that is being used to identify n number of disorders. Every single thing can be almost observed in the ECG. Any abnormality with cardiac or any other cardiac related, not directly related, but somehow related aspects will also be known by taking an ECG. Very important. So if you go for a master checkup, basic thing that they do will be ECG. So what is this ECG? It is electrocardiogram, right? You all know that. So what is the principle or what this actually does? Electro, right? This is going to record the electrical rhythm. Now, when I say electrical rhythm, what I'm trying to tell. Now, again in cardiac cycle, we have just seen this square diagram representing the four chambers, that is right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. And very unique property for cardiac muscles is your autorhythmicity. So I have told you it has got an ability to generate its own impulses, its own action potential. SI node is called as the pacemaker. It's a unique question. We have discussed all these. So when I say action potential, you all know it is an ionic based one, right? So there's going to be entry of sodium ions, the entry of calcium ions, or when the potential is going to decrease, there's going to be exit of potassium ions. So there are lots of things which are ionic in nature. And whenever there is movement of ions or flow of ions, I call it as electric current. You all know what is a current definition. The electric current is flow of ions. So here also there is a flow of ions. There is going to be some conduction or some voltage that is going to be seen in the cardiac muscle. So this electrocardiogram is going to record your potentials. It is going to record the action potential or your potential during the entire course of your heartbeat. So this has been observed in normal patient, a typical structure of no what to say, a series of know how a potential is going to appear in a normal cardiac patient is being done, and the typical normal cardiac rhythm is going to be something like this. So this you would have seen in lots of hospitals. This had become an hospital logo also for many hospitals, right? So this is how a typical or a normal action potential wave is going to be. So I am a normal cardiac patient. I take an ECG. My SI node and AV node is going to conduct my action potential and it is going to be recorded in this way. So let's not get into how it is recorded and how what the device is all about. But you need to understand that its main aim is to record or is to identify whether the action potential is conducted properly. If it is not get conducted properly, where is the issue? Whether is it at the atrium or whether is it at the ventricular level or is it somewhere else? That is the thing. So let us try to understand how it can do all that. So if you take a typical ECG wave, let me now give you a macroscopic view so that we try to understand things. This is P. So this is a typical ECG. So if you take, it has got three shapes. This is one portion, this is another portion, and this is another portion. So I've got three portions. the first portion, the second portion, the third portion. So this first portion, it is called as P wave. The second, it is called as Q R S complex. And the last one is called as T wave. For your NEET exam, they ask you what does each of these indicate? What does P wave indicate? What does QRS indicate? What does T wave indicate? When lub sound is produced, when dub sound is produced. That's it. These are the possible questions. This is what is coming every single year, right? So out of these 7 questions that I listed out, any one can come. So it is just coming like a shift in a shift basis. Okay. Now, for understanding the sequence of events, I have seen many students who say I'm getting confused, which is for PVA, which is for QRS and all. Just know cardiac cycle. Just take into your mind about the diagram that I drew at the end of my cardiac cycle video. So this is joint diastole, atrial systole, ventricular systole. So start from here. Okay, start from AS. So this AS is going to be P wave, atrial systole. Ventricular systole is QRS complex. Joint diastole, or to be more specific, I said a ventricular diastole is going to be T wave. Right? Know this. Now, wordings can slightly vary. Instead of systole, they're going to use a name or a word called as depolarization. You can use a term called as depolarization. We will be discussing about these terminologies in detail in nervous system. You can refer the video. Depolarization is I'm trying to stimulate the muscle. When I try to stimulate a muscle, then that is depolarization. So that stimulation is a positive one. So that is called depolarization. So all your systole is a result of depolarization. So P wave is going to represent atrial depolarization. QRS complex is going to represent ventricular depolarization. So atrial depolarization, P wave. Ventricular depolarization, QRS complex. Now coming on to T wave. T wave is going to represent ventricular repolarization. So when I try to inactivate a muscle, meaning when I'm trying to relax a muscle, then that is called as repolarization. What is called as repolarization. So P wave, atrial depolarization, QRS complex, ventricular depolarization, T wave, ventricular repolarization. Now, when will each of the heart sounds be heard? Now, atrial depolarization is what in the P wave. And you all know, following the atrial systole, there is closure of AV valves. Sorry, there is closure of AV valves. It is both tricuspid and bicuspid. Henceforth, there is lub sound. So lub sound can be usually heard after the P wave or at the end of P wave. And at the end of QRS complex, I'll be able to hear dub sound. And sometimes I've seen some AIMS question asking PR interval. Okay, interval is I'm trying to measure the time between two phases. Now, if I ask you what is the time interval between atrial systole and ventricular systole, you will be able to say it is 0.1 second. Because atrial systole is for 0.1 second and the next second your ventricular systole will begin. Right? So the time duration or the time interval between atrial systole and ventricular systole is just 0.1 second. But I need to appreciate it in an ECG. If you take in an ECG, just observe my Q wave. This Q wave, I have just given a slight drop, right? S wave, if you take, I have extended it to greater extent, but Q wave, I have just given a slight drop. So this is very negligible. This drop, this Q point itself is very negligible, which means what? The potential is going to be very, very, very negligible one. So I will not consider that Q per se for any measurement. So if you take PR interval, so which means, just try to understand this, PR interval. So P is atrial depolarization or it is atrial systole, and QRS. So since I have said Q is negligible, so I can just assume that R is going to coincide with Q. So R is going to mark the beginning of ventricular systole. So if I ask you what is PR interval, it is the interval between atrial depolarization and ventricular depolarization, or between atrial systole and ventricular systole. So again, if you take, it is zero point 0.1 second. So the PR interval is 0.1 second. Why did I mention about PR interval very specifically? Is because of a very important clinical condition. Now, you need to understand when ventricle will begin to contract. For which, let us take to this picture. SA node, yes, it's the pacemaker. It generates impulse, it gets to AV node. So this journey of impulse from SA node and AV node is going to cause atrial contraction. Now this impulse from the AV node, it has to travel through the Purkinje fibers, bundle of this, everything, and it has to reach your ventricular musculature. So if this AV node receives the impulse and conducts the impulse at the same time, just I'll repeat, try to understand. AV node receives the impulse from SA node, following which, if it sends the impulse immediately to these branches, then ventricle will immediately contract. Right? If there is a delay, what will happen? Ventricle contraction will take some time. Ventricle contraction will take some time. So what will happen? PR interval will increase. So if suppose this is my typical ECG with PR interval 0.1 second, just imagine now if my ECG is like this. So you are able to appreciate that my PR interval has increased, which means what? From the atrium, ventricle is receiving the impulses in a delayed time. So that's why ventricle is getting some time to get contracted. Right? So that is what is very important. So if there is an increase in the PR interval, then I can say that patient has got some conduction defect or he has got AV nodal delay. Now, if P wave is going to be depressed, all these are typical NEET AIMS questions, okay? If P wave is depressed, it is not having that proper peak, then I can say there is issue in SA node itself. If T wave is getting depressed, it is ventricular repolarization, right? So ventricle has some issues. That's it. Make it very simple, right? So most important thing that I want to say is about your PR interval, because that has even appeared in NEET 2016, I believe. So these are the information that you must know. Most important is these words: atrial depolarization, ventricular repolarization. This was 2020 question, this was 2018 question. 2019 they asked about lub sound and dub sound, right? And lub sound and dub sound is also a next set of important questions. So just know this, and apart from this, for your knowledge, I have just told you PR interval, what happens with PR interval, right? These are some details I want to share with respect to ECG. So with this, body fluids are coming to an end. I'll see you in some other chapter. Thank you all. Bye.